Welcome to Landmark Talks Property, a podcast by Landmark Information Group that covers all things property in short and intelligent podcasts.
Hello. In this podcast, we'll be exploring the concept of art and science in planning and whether changes to the National Planning Policy Framework signal a shift in the balance between the two. I'm Paul Marshall, geospatial consultant with Landmark Geodata, and joining me today are Josh Rains and Ed Griffiths. Let's begin with some introductions.
Hi, I'm Josh Rains, Managing Director for Landmark Geodata. So Landmark Geodata provide geospatial data and work with our clients for solutions and products at the earlier stages of due diligence around the land and property sector. In terms of our portfolio, we include ProMap and EnviroCheck, as well as our utility reports range to support our clients as they, undertake early stage due diligence.
I'm Ed Griffiths. I'm Head of Business and Client Analytics at Barbour ABI. We track and analyse UK planning activity from the smallest applications all the way through to big strategic developments, and our work reveals how policy, economics and market dynamics shape construction, ultimately planning being the very earliest indicator of that.
So let's start this conversation with the new National Planning Policy Framework. What do you see as the key changes in it?
So NPPF changes ultimately are doing a wide variety of things. So stronger pressure on local authorities to meet housing targets. Obviously 1.5 million new homes was the big laid out target from Labour, and actually the Conservative government, although unsuccessful, weren't much further behind with their laid out targets as well. Really though, it needs to be a bit of give and take. They need to give a bit to the house builders, but they can't take from the construction industry broadly as well. I thought it was a bit odd to also hear about the delayed homes penalties that they spoke about. I just feel that that's literally lifting people up and then pushing them back down again. You would presume that is purely policy making and to look positive in front of the UK population. You know, we're being tough on house builders to make sure they deliver their targets. I would hope that they would never actually follow through on those, because it would just be detrimental to the entire process. Other changes, so emphasis on beauty and design quality, but with much firmer benchmarks. An infrastructure-first policy, lots of things being elevated to critical infrastructure like data centres and things being planned much, much earlier. Fast-track processes for brownfield regeneration. There's lots of interesting things going on with brownfield at the moment. So, for example, the Wirral Local Authority have got the first brownfield-only local plan, which I thought was very, very interesting. Going back to the NPPF though, new central government powers to intervene, and also an elevated focus on environmental things as well. So net zero biodiversity becoming much bigger on the agenda and having much harsher regulations as well.
Yeah, I guess in summary, alongside that as well, there's a real focus on, like you say, benchmarking and definitions as part of that. So like you say, that the benchmarking when it comes to maybe some of the more subjective parts of planning, which I'm sure we'll touch on shortly. When we talk about brownfield, obviously the introduction of the grey belt and the definitions that are associated alongside those to try and make it as clear, I guess, as possible across those. So I think, overall it's a real mixture of a combination of definitions, targets, and sort of that focus on infrastructure, like you say.
Yeah, it seems from the outside looking in, it's about bringing a bit more rigour and a bit more accountability to something that perhaps historically had neither of those things. Maybe it might be a bit flippant to say.
So what it has done, though, in my view, is bring planning to the forefront of the conversation in the industry right now. And it's always been a sort of fairly interesting topic, quite a contentious one as well, I think you agree. But here's what I'm interested in. Is it an art or is it a science planning? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it could be both, or it is both. So from an art perspective, it can be very subjective. So similar planning applications can go in two very different areas, one be approved and one be rejected. And often references to things like local character and beauty are the reasons for rejection. Community benefit and flexibility that you need within that can be another reason why you would say it's more art than science. And then also it can be heavily politically influenced by people in the local area as well. So again, if somebody just doesn't want something to happen, that is art, not science. And from a science perspective, data-driven assessments, so viability, density, sustainability, they're all things that we're seeing become much, much more prevalent. Push for quantifiable benchmarks, as you were just referencing, Josh. So benchmarks and accountability, though. And also central government favouring evidence over discretion. So I think there's kind of both sides of the table, but I think we are seeing science starting to come more and more to the forefront. The thing that I think demonstrates that from the government's extract that was announced quite recently. So that's really teeing up the digitisation effort that we at Barbour really, really want to see, and I know you guys are very passionate about it as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's almost sort of seeing it as a spectrum from art on one side and science on the other. And I think when science is involved, we can talk around two main aspects, really. There's the aspect of data-driven decision-making, there's the aspect of benchmarking and measures that get used, and then there's the introduction of technology capabilities as part of it. So I think we're always going to land across that capability, because planning is such an emotive sort of capability. It's dealing with not just a local area, but a regional and national scale sort of changes across our country. So naturally, there's going to be an emotive aspect to any part of the planning process, and the moment you're engaging the wider public, it has to as part of that. And I think that's where we're going to see a real focus in terms of planning processes coming forward and investment opportunities coming forward, where they focus on a definition of place. So really not viewing the property as just a property or a bricks and mortar sort of capabilities or a number in terms of hitting a threshold, but actually seeing it as contributing to the value of the local area and creating a place where people want to be, where people want to live, where people want to work. And it's looking far further. Someone mentioned recently, sort of looking further and further beyond the red line boundary of a registered title in terms of its influence and its impact on the area. And particularly when we look at larger applications, there's going to be this statement of, okay, well, does it meet the threshold and the criteria for medical centres and community areas and schools, but also does it give that community feel and those areas for gatherings, those areas for social activities and building that. So I think when we look at it, and that's why I say sort of, there's always going to be an aspect of art on it as part of this. I think, like you say, Ed, in terms of where the definitions across the NPPF are coming forward, that's where we're seeing the drive towards more scientific sort of based and data-led decision making. It's done both through the statements of intent with the benchmarking, but also alongside that sort of the approaches to the local authority sort of decision-making process, trying to make that a far more sort of structured review process to drive that. And I think that's where we're seeing the push as we move forward that, and being from a data-based organisation with a background in geospatial and geography, it's something that we look at in terms of decision-making from that perspective. To your point, though, on the sort of other definition, I guess, of science being the technology capabilities, the extract aspect and unlocking information from historical planning records into data decision making is something obviously we're incredibly passionate about, working across our partnership with Barbour, but also directly with our clients. Good quality data is the bedrock for, what's the best way to say it? I guess speed and scale when it comes to both sort of data-led decision making, but also looking further ahead, sort of AI and technology capabilities. And it's a trend that we're not just seeing across planning. I think to be honest, it's a trend that we're seeing in terms of a lot of government investment. So this could be the onset of the sort of the data library sort of capabilities that are coming forward, but also the National Underground Asset Register, which has been a program that's been running for a few years now, where it's taking utility assets that are historically stored in a variety of ways and made accessible through a variety of ways, but actually standardizing the capabilities and the data, and the intent there being to unlock innovation on top of that. And I think that's the aspect that we look forward to from a planning perspective, by having a strong bedrock of data that's accessible and available, that we obviously work together heavily to create. Only improving that will only drive better innovations from both public and private sector that will support that sort of data-led decision making, to not repeat myself too much.
So the National Planning Policy Framework has been quite groundbreaking, really, in terms of the change it's generated and the move towards a sort of more digitised planning process. Do you see, therefore, the changes that you highlighted, Ed, particularly helping us move from an art to a more science-based approach? And is that, do you see that as a good or a bad thing?
I think a move to me personally, I am a very binary person. Either it is or it isn't. It's a 1 or a 0. So any time in my life where I can be more scientific about how I'm approaching things, I think that's great. From a construction and from an application perspective, a move away from art towards science will offer consistency and speed. That's, that they are huge benefits. It'll be faster, very clear when you do or do not meet the criteria for the application to be approved, and ultimately you will see a reduction in appeals. If we reduce appeals, it means that more applications can be reviewed. That will only benefit the construction industry in the long term. Some of the risks, though, are potential erosion of distinctiveness. So you've said it a number of times when we've spoken to each other, Josh, around if you just tick box, so going back to my point around a very binary true false, 1 0 yes no, if you just do tick boxing exercises, you really do run the risk of not kind of giving the necessary credit to placemaking qualities that you really do need to consider. So the best outcomes really will blend quite rigorous criteria with creative place-specific thinking. So I do think we need to go a little bit more towards science, but I wouldn't ever like it to be literally 1-0 binary decision making, because I do think then local character is probably at risk.
Yeah, completely agree, and I think it goes to that point. This is not just necessarily small scale investments. These are investments that change the how the countryside looks across the country. So that's where we're going to see that sort of balance really start to be struck between science and art. And I think, but it's clear that the NPPF is a step towards that data-driven and scientific decision-making. I think the benefits, as you say, without repeating it, is going to be speed and consistency. The challenges are going to be within the local sort of areas and managing that sort of the emotive side of some of those, but also alongside that, the capacity that we see in planning activity within local authorities, being able to accommodate an influx of planning applications if it's truly data sort of led. It's going to be a balance there of going, okay, great, there's a framework that we can work within. Do we have the resources, the knowledge, know how to actually interpret it at speed to match that? Is going to be the other factor that we see alongside side balancing those.
Definitely. So it's all about balance and also bringing confidence to the market as well, isn't it? So with all these changes that you've highlighted and risks you've highlighted as well, how do you see those affecting existing trends in planning over the next 12 months or so?
Yeah, I think it's a very good but very difficult question. I think probably brownfield applications is where I would be looking to think surely that's where we'll start to see activity and growth, just based on the facts. There will probably be some local authority resistance. I imagine some local authorities will embrace change and some will not embrace change at all, just by their very nature. I think evidence-heavy applications is where we are going to see more activity as well. So applications that are light on detail in the past that have perhaps been approved, we will probably stop seeing as many of those. People will probably lean more on the KPIs, more on the benefits, and really making sure that their applications are more, I suppose, abundant. I think that data-led applications will thrive, but the ones that can blend a little bit of the character, a little bit of the placemaking, will probably be the ones that are most successful, and that's what I would be doing if I was putting in an application tomorrow.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think in terms of volumes, as we've been talking a lot this morning, and I think there's an expectation that is going to drive volumes in the right direction of being able to anticipate the likely questions and rejections, and therefore being able to interpret and get ahead of those. So as you're completely right, Ed, that sort of evidence-based applications is going to be key and a trend that we see moving forwards. Brownfield, completely agree with. I think if I was to look slightly on the adjacent aspects of the planning market, what we can expect to see is more appetite for data. Yes, of course, I'd say that, but more appetite for data, and particularly geospatial data that can be analysed at a local level, at a regional level, at a national level, to help bring some of these decision-making processes as early as possible into the application process. So you can sort of go in with the expectation of, okay, this is going to be a positive application, or this is going to have challenges and it's going to be in these areas. That's where I need to build my evidence factor. And I think this is going to span across the sector in terms of the infrastructure requirements, particularly when we're looking at, like you said, sort of data center capabilities and the requirements that they have for infrastructure. That's going to drive a lot of need for early insight. But equally, the flip side of that is even with the sort of more residential-based applications, the factors of BNG in the environment, but also the social benefits, the more evidence that can be given in terms of how it will add value, how it will contribute to the local area, how it will contribute to the local character with true data-led and sort of evidence-backed sort of scenarios is going to really be a trend that I see sort of that consumption of information moving forwards.
Thanks, Ed and Joss, for the discussion. I think on the art and science balance, there's definitely tension between the two. Clearly, standardisation helps speed, but risks losing the uniqueness of place. They have to coexist, and in order to find success, we just need to find harmony. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the Landmark Talks Property channel, where you can hear all our episodes in our planning mini-series.
Thank you for listening to Landmark Talks Property. If you've enjoyed today's podcast, please hit subscribe. This podcast is for general purposes only. The views expressed are those of the hosts and guests and do not constitute professional advice.